All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Policing reality. Postmodern feminist-marxists don't care about your facts. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Policing reality. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The logic of lions. Dismantling the Marxist matriarchy with cash cannon and the savage will to conquer. You have been swimming in a sea of toxic lies, gaslit by a cultural Marxist machine that seeks to dismantle the very architecture of your soul, and it is time you woke up from the nightmare. The modern world does not want you to be a man. It wants you to be a domesticated tax unit, a docile creature that apologizes for its own strength and submits to the absurdity of equity. They tell you the village will support you, that competence is toxic, and that your history is a stain to be scrubbed away, but reality is a cruel teacher that does not care for your feelings. When your radiator blows a gasket on a desolate highway, or a sudden financial crisis hits, the village is nowhere to be found, leaving only the naked truth. Survival requires resources, and the state is a hostile, unreliable actor that abandons you to the wolves. You must become your own central bank, a fortress of solvency in a world of inflationary decay, or you will simply be another casualty of the genocentric resource extraction racket. This abandonment of wisdom is not an accident. It is a scorched earth campaign to sever you from your ancestors. They have erased Homer, Dante, and Shakespeare from the classrooms, replacing the pursuit of Irid and the transcendental ideals of truth, beauty, and goodness with a nihilistic drivel of grievance studies and postmodern relativism. If all truth is subjective, as the leftist sophists claim, then their claim is itself subjective, and therefore false, a logical serpent eating its own tail. They are eroding your capacity to think, to wield the trivium of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, because a rational man who can identify equivocation and fallacy is immune to their propaganda. They fear the man who reads the great books, for in those pages lies the foundation of the Western spirit, a spirit they are desperate to euthanize. Look closely at the lattice of exploitation they have built around you, a legal and social framework designed explicitly to exclude you. From Title IX, tribunals that bypass due process to family courts, that view fatherhood as a revenue stream, the policy framework is weaponized misandry disguised as justice. They scream about patriarchal oppression while men die in the gutters of suicide and workplace accidents, a disposable sex fueling a system that despises them. This is the gamma bias in action, distorting reality to paint women as eternal victims and men as perpetual perpetrators. But the biological reality of resource guarding and hierarchy will not be silenced by their gender studies degrees. It is time to reject the vice of deficiency known as the nice guy and embrace the Aristotelian golden mean of assertiveness, to stand firm in the face of the mob and reclaim the living spirit of the civilization that conquered the known universe. The bastion of solvency. It takes a village to raise a child is perhaps the most insidious lie ever whispered into the ear of Western man. A collectivist platitude designed to strip the father of his sovereignty and hand his offspring over to a committee of petty tyrants. The village is not a nurturing circle of support. It is a surveillance state of envious mediocrities, a herd of bickering bureaucrats and nosy neighbors seeking to usurp the patriarch's authority. History proves irrefutably that the nuclear family, led by a solvent and competent patriarch, is the only unit that has ever produced greatness, from the architects of Rome to the inventors of the Industrial Revolution. When you rely on the village, you rely on the lowest common denominator, and you invite the chaos of the mob into your living room. Greatness is solitary. It is born in the disciplined oikos, not the chaotic agora. This brings us to the etymological demolition of the safety net, a term dripping with the venom of dependence. The word welfare derives from the Old English welfaren, literally meaning to fare well or to prosper. The irony here is thick enough to choke a horse. Modern state welfare creates the very ill-faring it purports to cure. By incentivizing incompetence and rewarding the lack of foresight, the state transforms the male spirit from a soaring eagle into a plump, flightless turkey, waiting to be stuffed and roasted for the Thanksgiving feast of the bureaucracy. A man who accepts the safety net is a man who has accepted the cage, trading his agency for a bowl of thin gruel and a pat on the head from a politician who views him as a tax farm animal. The financial weapons of this war are wielded through the insidious mechanism of gamma bias in lending standards. Banks and state institutions, thoroughly infected by the equity dogma of cultural Marxism, actively penalize competent single men while subsidizing high-risk female borrowers and insolvent minorities. This is not economics, it is social engineering on a grand scale. A single man with a solid income and low expenses is often viewed with suspicion, a flight risk who won't conform to the consumerist debt-slave paradigm. Whereas a single mother with erratic income is heralded as a hero worthy of a mortgage she cannot pay. This creates a massive financial bubble, a castle of cards made of bad debt and wishful thinking that must inevitably burst, dragging the debris of civilization down with it. We must therefore construct a syllogistic foundation of competence that brooks no argument. Major premise: survival requires resources. Minor premise: the state is a hostile, unreliable actor that seeks to deplete those resources. Conclusion: the masculine man must be his own central bank. This logic is bulletproof. To abdicate the responsibility of resource accumulation is to abandon your duty to your oikos and to your own existence. True independence is the only prerequisite for freedom. Everything else is a variation of slavery. If you cannot absorb an unexpected financial shock without begging the bank or the state, you are not a free man. You are a serf dancing on a string held by a clown. This necessity is driven by the brutal evolutionary biology of gynocentric resource extraction. The female preference for resource security is a biological imperative hardwired by millennia of selection, where a woman's survival and that of her offspring depended on securing a provider. However, modern civilization has perverted this into a legal racket. Alimony and child support laws are not about justice. They are legal crystallizations of primitive mating strategies that enslave productive men to feed the unproductive. The state has replaced the father as the primary provider, allowing women to engage in hypergamous flights of fancy, secure in the knowledge that the coercive power of the courts will force a man to pay for the consequences of her choices. It is a transfer of wealth from the builders to the breeders, enforced by the bayonet of the law. I witnessed the stark contrast between competence and dependence play out in real time during the car breakdown litmus test. I was driving with a friend, a man who prided himself on his modern sensitivity, when his engine sputtered and died on a desolate stretch of highway. Panic immediately seized him. His hands trembled, his voice rose an octave, and he frantically scrolled through his phone looking for a roadside assistance service, like a helpless child calling for mommy. In that moment of crisis, his facade of equality crumbled, revealing the terrified boy beneath. Contrast this with the patriarch. When the machine fails, he does not wail. He assesses the situation, checks the gauges, identifies the fault, and executes a solution. Excellence is not theoretical, it is demonstrated under pressure. The man who freezes at a flat tire is the same man who will freeze when the economy collapses. To armor yourself against this coming entropy, you must adopt the 6-month protocol. This is not financial advice, it is a survival strategy. You must ruthlessly cut consumerist nonsense that effeminate pursuit of trinkets, gadgets, and status symbols designed to impress people who despise you to build a 6-month runway. Every dollar wasted on a latte or a subscription service is a dollar you are handing to your enemies. This cash reserve is your tactical buffer, your ammunition for the war of attrition against a society that wants you broke and compliant. When the black swans descend, and they will, you will not be the one flapping in the wind. You will be the one with the shelter, built of stone and gold. We must also deploy the trivium against the corrosion of inflation. Grammar teaches us the facts. Currency is being debased, the money supply is expanding, and your purchasing power is evaporating. Logic dictates the inevitable consequence. Printing money is theft, and the value stolen from your savings is transferred to the asset-holding elite. Rhetoric is the tool used by the state to hide this theft, masking the destruction of wealth as economic stimulus or quantitative easing. To hold cash passively is a feminine, weak strategy. To hold assets, land, gold, skills is a masculine, active defense. You cannot stop the Marxist corrosion of value, but you can get out of the way and let it destroy the fools who believe in the fiat fairy tale. Ultimately, regard this steadfast preparation as spiritual conflict. Building emergency savings is more than a routine financial responsibility. It represents a defense of your spirit against the chaotic evil of an uncertain world. Each dollar you set aside adds strength to your sovereignty. Your financial statements are not merely numerical records. They represent power dynamics between you and entities that would control you. With few money, you possess the means to be authentic. You can express truth, confront adversity directly, and disengage when necessary. Prevent the decay of contemporary society from affecting your spirit. Construct your fortress of financial security, stand strong, and allow opponents to harmlessly break against your defenses like waves on cliffs, as you remain steadfast, timeless, and liberated. This tyranny of tears is the inevitable byproduct of an ideology that views the Western canon not as a repository of truth, but as a rival to its own totalizing power. They silence the student because his questions echo the spirit of the dead white males they are desperate to erase, the very architects of the logic they cannot refute. It is a strategic deletion, a malicious swap, where the masculine heroism of the Iliad is traded for the whining grievance-mongering of postmodern sophistry, severing the chain of wisdom that binds men to their divine potential. The cenotaph of wisdom. I witnessed the crucifixion of reason in a sociology lecture hall at a state university last spring. A young man, fresh-faced and armed with data on the biological realities of sexual dimorphism, raised his hand to question the professor's assertion that gender is a purely social construct unmoored from physics. He did not shout, he did not insult. He simply asked if the professor believed that skeletal differences observed by forensic anthropologists were mere social hallucinations. The room went silent, not because the students were contemplating the query, but because the professor, a woman with the dead eyes of a zealot, deployed the ultimate weapon of the modern academy. She did not answer. Instead, she narrowed her gaze and hissed that his question was an act of violence, a microaggression that violated the safe space of the oppressed. She threatened him with removal from the course and a mark on his permanent record for harassment. The boy sat down, defeated. This is the state of higher education. It is no longer a pursuit of wisdom, philosophia, but a penal colony where the logos is imprisoned and the warden is a shrieking harpy of feelings. This institutionalized stupidity is not an accident. It is a strategic demolition of our heritage. Consider the stark contrast between the literary titans of the Greco-Roman tradition and the nihilistic drivel peddled today. When we read the Iliad, we encounter Achilles, a man grappling with honor, rage, and the inevitability of death, themes that transcend time and speak to the masculine soul. Conversely, open a modern journal of critical theory, and you are assaulted by paragraphs so dense with jargon, they mean nothing, solipsistic grievance-mongering that asserts reality itself is a conspiracy of white men. They have replaced the search for the good the true, and the beautiful with a frantic scramble to find oppression in every shadow. The dead white males are not discarded because they are irrelevant, but because they are dangerous to the establishment. These texts teach men to be strong, sovereign, and rational, and a population of such men cannot be ruled by the soft tyranny of the nanny state. To understand how we arrived at this abyss, we must look to the etymology of the very word education, which has been twisted to suit the designs of our jailers. The word derives from two Latin roots, educare, which means to train, to mold, or to domesticate, and educere, which means to lead out, to draw forth, or to liberate. The classical Western ideal was always educatory, drawing the divine reason and potential out of the man, leading him from the cave of ignorance into the light of the sun. The modern feminist-marxist system, however, deals exclusively in educare. They do not seek to liberate your mind. They seek to mold it into a compliant shape. They treat the male spirit as a wild beast that must be broken, gelded, and housebroken to serve the matriarchy. They are not educators. They are handlers, and you are the livestock. This brings us to the central logical fallacy of the postmodern left, the doctrine of relativism. Their entire worldview hinges on the claim that all truth is subjective, that there is no objective reality, only competing narratives of power. We can dismantle this pathetic lie with a single reductio ad absurdum. If the statement, all truth is subjective, is objectively true, then it contradicts itself, because an objective truth cannot exist under its own premise. If the statement is merely subjective, then we are free to reject it as mere opinion. The proposition is a snake eating its own tail. It is philosophical suicide. Yet they cling to it because it allows them to deny biological facts, such as the differing reproductive strategies of men and women when those facts become inconvenient. They reject the transcendental bedrock of truth, because truth is the one thing their lies cannot survive against. We see the consequences of this rejection in the aesthetic realm, which serves as a spiritual canary in the coal mine. The modernists will tell you that beauty is in the eye of the beholder a social construct. But your biology knows better. Look at the Gothic majesty of a medieval cathedral or the harmonic perfection of a Beethoven symphony. They resonate with the logos, the ordering principle of the universe. Now look at modern architecture, brutalist concrete bunkers that look like filing cabinets for humans, or the nonsensical splatters of paint in a modern gallery. You feel a visceral sense of repulsion, a sickening in your gut. That is not a social construct, that is a biological alarm bell. The absence of beauty is not a stylistic choice, it is the signature of decay and evil. When a culture stops producing beauty, it has stopped believing in the divine. Furthermore, the removal of Homer, Dante, and Shakespeare from university curricula is a calculated scorched earth tactic designed to sever you from your ancestors. By erasing the canon, they leave you spiritually orphaned. If you do not know Dante, you cannot understand the nature of sin and justice. If you do not know Shakespeare, you cannot grasp the complexity of the human soul. They replace these giants with third-rate agitprop because a man who knows his history is a man who cannot be gaslit. They need you to be rootless, floating in a sea of presentism, so they can graft their fake, poisonous ideology onto your empty trunk. They are burning the Library of Alexandria all over again, and they are doing it to you. To fight back, you must weaponize the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. These are the three liberal arts that forge the intellects of the West. Grammar allows you to define terms and stop them from shifting the goalposts via the equivocation fallacy. Logic enables you to dismantle their syllogisms and expose the non sequiturs that hold their worldview together like wet tissue paper. Rhetoric gives you the power to persuade and to speak the truth with a force that shatters their narratives. When a leftist attempts to redefine racism to include power plus prejudice solely to excuse their own bigotry, you use grammar to nail down the definition and logic to show the hypocrisy. They rely on double-speak, a fog of confusion to hide their lack of substance. The trivium is the wind that blows that fog away, leaving them naked and trembling before reality. The stakes of this battle could not be higher, and we can prove the trajectory of our civilization is suicide through a simple syllogism. Major premise: any civilization that despises its own history and founders cannot survive, as it cuts itself off from the source of its strength and identity. Minor premise: the West, through the lens of critical theory and feminism, currently despises its history, demonizing its figures as nothing more than oppressors. Conclusion: therefore, the current trajectory of the West is suicide. We are racing toward the cliff edge, led by fools who think they can fly. The remedy is a radical return to the patriarchal values that built this world. We need the stoic hardness of the Romans and the relentless curiosity of the Greeks. We must stop apologizing for existing. It is time to form clandestine circles of learning, underground gatherings where we read the great books and train our minds in the art of war against the lies. In an age of illiterate mobs who communicate in tweets and tantrums, the ability to read, understand, and argue using the wisdom of the ancients is a revolutionary act. Do not wait for the universities to save you. They are the graves where knowledge goes to die. Save yourself. Pick up Aristotle. Read Marcus Aurelius. Reclaim your mind. The cenotaph of wisdom is a monument to what we have lost, but it does not have to be your tomb. You can choose to be the living embodiment of the spirit that carved the marble, the logic that built the aqueducts, and the courage that explored the stars. The lies of the Marxists and the feminists are brittle. One strike of the truth shatters them forever. This judicial castration on campus is merely the visible tumor of a systemic cancer, a localized skirmish in a vast war of extraction against the masculine essence. The Marxist sophists, forever wailing about core nations exploiting the periphery, have inverted reality to conceal their own predatory design, ignoring the true colonialism happening within our own borders. Logic dictates that the state has become the ultimate core, ruthlessly strip mining the actual periphery, the nuclear family and the father, to subsidize the bloated gynocentric leviathan. I intend to rip this economic sophistry apart and prove that the truly oppressed class is not the foreigner, but the Western father himself. The lattice of exploitation. Picture, if you possess the stomach for it, a modern American university campus, a supposed bastion of higher learning, where a young man finds himself summoned to a star chamber, not for a crime proven, but for a feeling perceived. This is the Title IX Inquisition, a Kafkaesque nightmare, where the statutes of the Inquisition have been swapped for the bureaucratic euphemisms of HR departments. But the result is identical: the crushing of the masculine spirit. You are accused, you are guilty, and your only hope lies not in evidence. You are forbidden from cross-examining your accuser, but in the groveling submission of your will. I have spoken to men whose lives were shattered, not by a judge in a robe, but by a Title IX coordinator in a cardigan. Men expelled because the preponderance of the evidence, a standard lower than reasonable doubt, demanded a sacrifice to the goddess of feelings. This is not law. It is a witch hunt designed to castrate masculine initiative before it can even threaten the gynocentric order. To understand the machinery grinding men into dust, we must dismantle the economic sophistry of Immanuel Wallerstein and his world systems theory. Wallerstein posits a core exploiting a periphery, but he, like most leftists, missed the forest for the trees because he was too busy hating capitalism. I tell you the truth. The true periphery in the modern West is the nuclear family, specifically the father. We are the colonies from which resources are extracted. The core is the state machinery, a bloated leech that feeds on the labor of the father to fund the gynocentric welfare state. You work, you toil, and your surplus value is confiscated to subsidize the very state that seeks to replace you, leaving you as an external resource to be mined and discarded. This theft is hidden by the corruption of language, a tactic George Orwell identified as the prerequisite for tyranny. Consider the etymology of justice, rooted in the Latin justitia, which signifies righteousness, equity, and the giving to each his due. It is a blind goddess holding scales, indifferent to identity. Contrast this with the modern leftist shibboleth of equity, which they have the audacity to conflate with justice. Equity is not justice. It is a demand for equality of outcome, a theft of property and merit that violates natural law. It is the deliberate destruction of the justitia scale to ensure the undeserving receive a prize they did not earn, violating the cosmic order of cause and effect. The mechanism of this theft relies on a persistent cognitive distortion known as grammar bias. This is the deliberate filtering of information to exaggerate female victimization while simultaneously minimizing or erasing male suffering. Look at the data on domestic violence, DV. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, have admitted for years that men are victims of physical aggression by partners at rates roughly equal to women. Yet, the policy framework dictates that only men are perpetrators and only women are victims. This is not a mistake. It is a feature of a system built on a lie. Gamma bias ensures that funding goes to female shelters while male victims are laughed out of police stations, proving the genocracy values narrative over the sanctity of facts. This brings us to the absolute fraud of the feminist patriarchal bargain, a sociological delusion claiming men conspire to grant themselves privileges. This is the logical equivalent of saying the chickens conspired with Colonel Sanders. The red pill truth, validated by the male disposable hypothesis, is irrefutable. If the patriarchy existed to benefit men, men would not be the ones dying in the gutters of foreign wars in their millions, nor would they comprise 93% of workplace fatalities. Men do not rule. We serve and we die. The privilege of the patriarchal bargain is the privilege to be a beast of burden, protecting women who reap the benefits of safety and provision without paying the cost in blood and sweat. Any attempt to circumvent this biological reality results in the evolutionary suicide of the culture. Marxists chant from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, attempting to short-circuit the brutal but essential reality of male resource competition. In nature, the male guards resources to prove his genetic worth. It is the crucible that forged civilization. Forced redistribution is an attempt to prop up the weak at the expense of the strong, a rebellion against Darwinian reality that inevitably leads to stagnation. When you remove the requirement for competence to secure resources, you do not create equality. You create a surplus of incompetence and a deficit of innovation. We see this playing out in the economic parasitism of the welfare state, a mechanism that incentivizes the mating of low-quality males with irresponsible females, thereby degrading the genetic stock of the nation. When the state acts as the surrogate husband, stealing from productive single men to fund single mothers, it breaks the link between sexual choice and consequence. This dysgenic cycle rewards behavior that in a sane society would lead to evolutionary dead ends. We are actively paying for our own replacement, funding the destruction of the family unit by making the father an unnecessary financial accessory rather than the indispensable head of the household. Logic compels us to face the conclusion of these premises, a syllogism that no amount of leftist sophistry can refute. Major premise: policies that favor one sex over another are discriminatory by definition. Minor premise: men have zero reproductive rights, are systematically discriminated against in family courts, losing custody 80% of the time, and are excluded from vast swaths of health initiatives like the Office on Women's Health, while male suicide rates skyrocket. Conclusion: the state is not a neutral arbiter. The state is actively and legally discriminatory against men. We are living under a system of state-enforced misandry. Finally, look at the wall of exclusion erected in our institutions to ensure the next generation of boys is raised without the stabilizing influence of masculine authority. The system screams about a lack of women in STEM while remaining eerily silent about the systemic exclusion of men from teaching, nursing, and psychology. This is not patriarchy keeping women out. This is matriarchal gatekeeping, keeping men away from children. They fear the masculine influence because they know that a boy raised by strong men becomes a man who cannot be controlled. By removing men from the formative years of education and care, they ensure boys are domesticated, medicated, and primed for the slaughter. Severed from the transcendent spirit of Western civilization that once made us masters of our fate, we have dragged the rotting carcass of the cultural Marxist conspiracy into the light, proving with irrefutable syllogism that the state seeks to geld the male spirit. But facts are merely the grammar of our resistance. The rhetoric requires that we embody the truth in our very flesh. The leftist academic can hide behind tenure, but he cannot escape the biological reality that hierarchies are the fabric of existence. We must pivot now from the macro-analysis of this gynocentric rot to the micro-application of sovereign authority, because to save the West, one must first learn to master the reality in front of him. The equilibrium of force. I remember the night a man twice my size, reeking of cheap vodka and impotent rage, slammed his fist onto the table and demanded I move. He was loud, chaotic, a storm of biological bluff seeking a victim. I did not rise to his bait. I did not shrink. I simply held his gaze with a calm, predatory stillness, my body relaxed, ready to strike, but entirely uninterested in the theatrics. I said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until his drunken confidence evaporated. He mumbled an apology and shuffled away, defeated not by violence, but by the terrifying reality of a man who owns his space. This is the equilibrium of force. True power does not need to scream, it merely is, and the mere presence of unshakable frame shatters the illusions of the weak. This interaction reveals the fundamental law of social dynamics that the cultural Marxists desperately try to memory hole with their gibberish about equity. You must understand the syllogism of respect if you wish to survive the modern dating market and the street alike. Major premise: human nature respects strength and disdains weakness. Minor premise: the modern man is systematically taught to be weak, apologetic, and servile. Conclusion: the modern man is despised by women and society alike, regardless of his kindness. You can be the nicest man in the room, but if you have the backbone of a jellyfish, you are sexually repulsive and socially irrelevant. This is not cruelty, it is biology. Women constantly administer shit tests, those seemingly nagging questions or provocations, not out of malice, but as a biological firmware update seeking competence. They are asking, is this man strong enough to handle chaos? If you apologize, pander, or seek harmony at the expense of truth, you fail the interview. You are filtered out of the gene pool. To pass these tests, you must weaponize the trivium of social dominance, turning every interaction into a martial art of the mind. First comes grammar, reading the room and identifying the players. Who is the aggressor? Who is the manipulator? Who is trying to frame the narrative? Second is logic, calculating the leverage. Why is this person lying? What is their material interest? Where is the contradiction in their argument? Third is rhetoric, delivering the command or the rebuttal with decisive force. When a woman or a leftist tries to reframe your valid boundaries as aggression, you do not debate their feelings. You use logic to dismantle the frame and rhetoric to assert your reality. You do not explain, you state. You do not justify, you define. This hierarchical competence is not a social construct. It is written into our very DNA. We share with the lobster an ancient hardwired system of dominance and submission governed by serotonin. When a lobster loses a fight, his brain dissolves and he regresses to a cowardly state. When he wins, he grows bold and confident. The same serotonin circuits govern our posture and our confidence. The leftist attempt to flatten hierarchies is a war against biology itself, a pathetic attempt to pretend that the lobster who won the fight is morally equivalent to the one who scurried into the mud. They want to turn us into bottom feeders because top feeders are harder to exploit. But you cannot legislate away the reality that some men are competent and some are not. Chaos ensues when you deny the biological imperative for order. The virtuous man does not rage like a tyrant, nor cower like a slave. He occupies the Aristotelian golden mean of aggression. The ancients called this thumos, righteous spiritedness. The nice guy is a vice of deficiency, lacking the courage to assert his will. The tyrant is a vice of excess, using force to mask his insecurity. The alpha male, the man who builds civilizations, exists in the virtuous mean, possessing the capacity for violence but keeping it sheathed, wielded only to protect the good, the true, and the beautiful. This is the man the West was built by. The Constitution and the Parthenon were not erected by men seeking safe spaces or trigger warnings. They were forged by men with chests, by assertive spirits who policed reality. We must recognize that the term toxic masculinity is a weaponized logical fallacy of equivocation, designed by cultural subversives to render you defenseless. They deliberately conflate the vice of brutality with the virtue of strength, hoping you are too stupid to notice the switch. By defining masculinity itself as toxic, they aim to chemically castrate your spirit, leaving you unable to resist the encroaching evil of the world. Do not fall for it. Strength is not toxic. Weakness is. Your ability to exert force is the only thing standing between order and the abyss. To reject your nature is to invite your own destruction. Therefore, you must practice the assertion drill daily to reclaim your sovereignty from the feminized mob. When you buy coffee, hold the cashier's gaze just a second too long, not out of creepiness, but out of comfort with dominance. When someone accuses you of wrongdoing for stating a fact, refuse to apologize. Apologize for nothing if you are right. Let the tension hang in the air. Let them squirm. You are re-enshrining the truth as the supreme authority. This is how you smash the modern Babylon of woke, not by begging for permission, but by embodying the living spirit of the West. You stand tall, eyes clear, logic sharp, and you refuse to be moved by the lies of the degenerate. Be the wall against which the waves of deceit break and vanish. You stand now at the precipice of a new sanity, armed with the trivium and the cold steel of reality, finally seeing the world not as a chaotic fog, but as a logical machine rigged by those who despise you. We have dismantled the lie that the state is your father is your oikos, and your only safety net is the strength of your own arm and the weight of your own gold. You have seen how the Academy attempts to lobotomize you by scrubbing Dante and Homer from the syllabus, replacing the orate of the hero with the whining grievance of the victim. But you now possess the intellectual antibodies to resist that infection. You understand that the village the leftists clamor for is just a lynch mob of petty bureaucrats and ideological enforcers, and you refuse to be their sacrifice. You have looked at the hard data. Men killing themselves in record numbers. Fathers evicted from their own homes by family courts acting as extraction rackets for a genocentric leviathan. And you realize that compassion for this system is merely a synonym for suicide. This is not a game of polite debate. It is a spiritual war for the soul of Western civilization, and you are now the standing army. The syllogism of your existence is irrefutable. If the West was built by aggressive, competent, literate patriarchs, and the current system seeks to castrate competence, silence literacy, and punish aggression, then the system is not merely flawed, it is an anti-civilizational suicide cult. You possess the remedy. You will not be the nice guy who finishes last. You will be the terrifyingly competent man who finishes first because he understands the biological reality of dominance hierarchies. You will treat your emergency fund as a weapon, your library as a fortress, and your frame as an impenetrable shield against the gamma bias of the rotting elite. Go forth and police your reality with the ruthless logic of Aristotle and the unyielding spirit of a Spartan. Do not apologize for your strength. Do not bargain for respect. And do not cede an inch of ground to the postmodern degenerates who seek to dissolve the good, the true, and the beautiful into a gray slurry of equity and relativity. You are the living spark of the greatest culture the universe has ever known, and your duty is to burn so bright that the shadows of Marxism scurry back into the holes they crawled out of. Take this red pill, swallow it dry, and become the man who saves the world simply by refusing to participate in its lie. The truth is yours. Now go out and make it hurt. And now the sponsored book introduction. Policing Reality. Postmodern feminist-marxists don't care about your facts. Men are under attack. If you've ever been called toxic for defending your family, mocked for valuing logic over feelings, or watched institutions you trusted betray reality to appease ideological mobs, this book is your weapon. I wrote Policing Reality because I lived the collapse. I've seen fathers bankrupted by courts that reward mothers for abandoning marriages. I've watched boys drugged into passivity by schools pathologizing male energy as a disorder. I've debated academics who cite Foucault to deny biological sex, then called security when I quoted crime stats proving men's physical dominance. This isn't theory, it's survival. The facts don't care about your feelings, but postmodern feminists and Marxist academics do. They've rewritten history, silenced dissent, and pathologized masculinity to engineer a society where men apologize for existing. You've seen the results: collapsing birth rates, surging male suicide, and a generation of boys raised on porn and antidepressants instead of purpose. This book isn't for the faint-hearted. If you still believe toxic masculinity is a real diagnosis, or think diversity trainings will fix civilization, close this book now. Go binge Netflix, collect stamps. This is for men ready to confront uncomfortable truths like how 80% of violent crime is male. Not because we're broken, but because society needs protectors, not therapists. Inside, you'll dissect the playbooks of those dismantling the West, the transgender lobby grooming children, corporations trading merit for equity quotas, and beta males who'd rather blame capitalism than bench press. You'll get data they suppress: FBI crime reports, fertility studies, and IQ research, and strategies to rebuild. We'll expose critical race theory's profit motive, Islam's demographic siege, and why Sparta outlasted every inclusive utopia. This isn't a self-help book. It's a war manual. You'll learn to reject shame, lead without apology, and reverse the lies rotting society. The choice is simple. Keep swallowing blue-pilled platitudes while they erase your legacy, or fight. Your ancestors didn't cross oceans or conquer frontiers by processing trauma. They built, they fought, they won. It's your turn. Policing Reality. Postmodern feminist-marxists don't care about your facts. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.